This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen.
I think it's time to blow this scene. Get everybody in the stuff together. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
Pop culture conventions, places where fans of comics, the Marvel and DC universes, Star Wars, and everything in between can gather, dress up, and geek out over all fandoms while making lifetime friendships. Across the globe, conventions have been massive multi-day events. Last year, New York Comic-Con had over 200,000 attendees. Closer to home, ConnectiCon, a Connecticut pop culture convention based in Hartford, has been bringing fans together for over 20 years. But like many conventions, it's changed to evolve with the times. Fans, today's show is just for you. We're talking about all things fandom in Connecticut and beyond. Have you been to a convention? Are you a cosplayer? Are your kids cosplaying? Give us a call, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. And joining us now is Matt Daigle. He's the founder of ConnectiCon. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, want to kind of get the origin story here about ConnectiCon. Can you tell us, how did the con first get started?
Oh, geez. I was in college, and I was in the fantasy club at University of Hartford, and I was president at the time, and we were going to a college-based convention at SUNY Stony Brook called Icon, which unfortunately is now defunct. And they would sponsor our whole club to come down to the event, and it was filled with science fiction, fantasy literary authors, anime voice actors, movie people, comic book people. And then they just had lots of panels and workshops and board games and role-playing games and video games and basically everything we all liked. And it was enough variety that nobody got bored. During the summers, we'd also go to some comic book conventions or Otakon down in Baltimore and things like that. And when I was at those really narrowly focused events, I was like, man, I wish I could do something else. And also, how come nothing like this exists in New England, or more specifically Connecticut? So as my junior thesis to graduate, I did a whole event planning paper and research document. And I was like, maybe this will actually work. Let's try it. And 4 of my friends from college were like, yeah, we're on board with you. Let's do it. So 2002 to 2003, we had about 9 months, and we threw the first ConnectiCon at the University of Hartford campus.
Well, that's amazing, by asking the question of why don't we have that here, and you kind of just made it happen. And I'm assuming there's a lot of work behind that. But it's such what a great story. A couple of fans, as per the conversation today, making something happen for fans. And with that in mind too, what was the thought process of getting it going? What did the first few years of the convention look like?
My goal was to keep it on the university campus for as long as possible before we outgrew the space. The biggest challenge with that was there were no hotels close by. You had to stay in downtown Hartford and commute 15 minutes up Albany Ave to get to University of Hartford. So we were there for 2 years. Then the convention center opened, and the overall goal was eventually move into the convention center. And once we moved into the convention center, we started growing pretty rapidly. And then the convention scene exploded in like 2009. And so everybody was just, I'm going to run a convention. It's not as easy as people think.
Right.
There's a lot involved. I'm already currently in the works of planning ConnectiCon in 2027.
Wow.
Those details are being placed at the moment. Even though 25 hasn't even happened yet.
Right.
It's still next weekend. So I don't know. I wanted it to be like a 3,000, 5,000 person event, and maybe get a little bit bigger so we could pull some bigger name guests. And we're looking at 16,000 unique attendees probably this summer. If we did turnstile count, that puts us over 60,000 people, which is kind of, I believe, how New York Comic-Con counts their people, is the turnstile number.
Well, it's amazing to see how it's grown, especially considering when you first started this, social media wasn't really sort of in the picture yet in the way that we are seeing it now. Are you seeing that being sort of part of the process now, where the exposure certainly helps?
It definitely helps engage the community more frequently. There was, I think, maybe MySpace existed back in 2003, but I don't think it did. We just had a website, and all of our registration back then was done by paper. So you mailed us a check with a paper form, and we would just go to the university library and have 20 people enter all the information into a database a couple times a year back then. And now it's all online. We don't do any paper registrations at all.
Well, you just took me back to an image of myself coding my MySpace page. So, but I can't tell you exactly what year that was. Can you imagine if that was still around? I wonder if that would sort of add into the fandom scene. But I mean, as
MySpace is still there, just nobody really uses it.
Right.
The bigger challenge with social media is it's evolving all the time.
Right.
So certain demographics, so like Facebook is where I live. I don't want to be on Instagram. I don't want to be on Twitter. And then there's other people that are like, I don't want to be on Meta, period, but Instagram is them. So I guess I'm there.
Well, I suppose
so we have to be on so many different channels to reach different audiences.
Right. Right. And then and speaking of that kind of connection, I guess you can call that different kinds of fandoms too within the social media platforms in some way. I know you talked about how you had the question of why don't we have something like this in Connecticut, and knowing that there are major pop culture conventions that take place in the Northeast now. There's PAX East convention in Boston, which celebrates gaming and gaming culture. We know the New York Comic-Con, and of course out on the West Coast, San Diego Comic-Con is the big one. Can you talk about, you mentioned why you want to bring something like this to Connecticut, but are you surprised at how popular it really became?
Not really. In high school, I was in a nerd club and worked at the local comic book shop. So I've always kind of been in that culture and seen the people, and they've just never really had a good place to congregate in the Northeast. It's mostly been specifically comic book conventions.
Right.
And they're limited hours. They don't have a lot of programming content. And that's, I think, one of the things that makes ConnectiCon stand out and be different is we are more focused on the fandom communities. We have hangouts that are just, oh, you're a fan of this series or show or whatever. We're going to set aside an hour for everybody that loves this thing to just come and get together and talk to each other. There's no presenter. It's just people gathering at a space. But we also have over 250 fan-run presentations on anything that might relate to fandom. Fantasy weapons, writing fictional universes, if you want to be a writer, how to write a campaign for Dungeons & Dragons, how to do board game design, how to do voice work for voiceovers, like covers everything and anything you think of, how to make a cosplay, how to work with foam, how to choose fabrics, all sorts of stuff.
Well, I love that description because I think you really sort of spotlighted on how there's a lot that goes behind being in fandoms. I mean, you could just be a fan and enjoy the media, but there are so many people who are so immersed in their fandoms or just the thing that they're obsessed with right now. It sounds like it's very intentional the way you went about it to make this ConnectiCon more community focused versus meeting a celebrity, if you will.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was grumpy with when I would go to especially a comic book convention. It was really just focused on the 6 to 8 hour day, go in, meet the celebrities, pay for their autograph, get a photo op with them, and then leave. There's maybe one panel every hour. If you're lucky, it's a bigger event and there's two. So if you're all done shopping and meeting celebrities that you wanted to meet, there's nothing to do. You go home. If I'm spending that kind of money and getting a hotel and traveling, I want to know that I've got stuff to do all the time. So at ConnectiCon, one of our goals is we want to make sure that people have to make difficult choices every 15 minutes on where they want to go and what they want to do. So every 15 minutes, we have at minimum, two different panels starting all day, every day. We've also got a free play arcade with 100 machines set up. We've got video game systems with 100 consoles set up. We've got a 200 and plus count title board game library available, role-playing games. We've got a kid zone for arts and crafts and activities for 10 and under crowd. Can't just drop your kids off there, though. Mom and dad have to participate.
Right. Maybe find a family cosplay that you can put together.
Yeah, yep. And then we also have, because so many folks are in the fandoms seem to be on the spectrums, we also have places where if you're overstimulated, you can go and just get some quiet time without all the buzz of the people around you. And even that with cosplayers, they need a safe space where they can go sit and eat and drink without somebody running up, hey, can I get your picture? They need that downtime too. So we've set aside places for that as well. We've actually always been very friendly to all communities within fandoms. So we actually have a fairly large furry fandom population that comes to ConnectiCon. I would say it's between 200 and 300 people. It's not a big portion of the convention, but it's enough. They do a furry pride parade on Saturday and march around the convention center, and it's pretty fun. But those costumes get really hot.
Right.
So you need somewhere where you can go, take your hat off, your head off, and not have someone know who you are, because the persona is very important to them. So we've got that space set aside as well. So we try to make sure we're covering all the bases and making sure everybody is got something to do that's within their realm, and that they feel safe and at home and welcomed. We've banned a number of people for coming and having fun at other people's expense. If that's your jam, please don't come to our event. We really don't want you to come and make fun of people. That's awful. Don't do it.
Well, and actually, just to roll on that a little bit more, because we've mentioned earlier that conventions has evolved since, I think one of the earliest ones happened in the 60s, and up until now, I imagine there's been a lot of changes. And it sounds like, especially the way you are going about creating a safe space for everyone who is there, seems very organic. Are there more intentional things that you're doing, especially today?
I think really the biggest change we've made in the last 2 years is making sure we have quiet space and just a place where cosplayers can go and be out of character and be their normal selves. A lot of cosplayers, they embody the character and they act as the character would in the series when they're walking around the convention floor and interacting with other attendees, which is really cool. But putting that on for hours at a time can be really exhausting. So they need a space that's not just their hotel room, because they might be staying up in Windsor, or out in Manchester, or out in Farmington. Somebody stayed down in New Haven last year and took the train up every day.
Wow, amazing.
I was like, well, that's fun. There's definitely closer hotels. Like, yeah, but I like trains. So that seemed fun. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Glad you had an extra adventure with your convention trip.
Right. I think that's very enriching to the experience as well. And we're so excited to hear more about what the con can bring to people around the world, really, and also here in Connecticut. With us for the hour is Matt Daigle. He's the founder of ConnectiCon, a Connecticut pop culture convention based in Hartford. And coming up, we're talking about the evolution of cosplay and what exactly is that. So if you or your kids are a cosplayer or just a fan, we want to hear from you. And let us know what makes conventions so special. Will you be checking out ConnectiCon next week? We would love to know. 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. ConnectiCon, a Connecticut pop culture convention based in Hartford, starts next week. Matt Daigle, who's the founder of ConnectiCon, is here with us today. And if you've ever attended a comic convention, you probably saw a lot of people dressed as their favorite characters. The act of cosplaying has exploded in recent years, and the nature and the rules of cosplay are changing as well. Joining us now is Andrew Liptek. He's the author of Cosplay, A History. Andrew, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us is Paul Booth. He's a professor of media and pop culture at DePaul University in Illinois. Paul, appreciate your time as well.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And for our fans, let us know if you have any questions or if you want to share your own experiences. Give us a call, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So, Andrew, you literally wrote a book about cosplay, which is a phrase that we've mentioned a couple times now. But before we get to your OG story, can you tell us exactly what is cosplay?
Yeah, cosplay is the act of dressing up as a fictional character. It's an act of fandom, and it's basically people expressing their love for a character or a franchise or a story, and it goes back many years.
And how did you get into this fandom or this, area?
Me personally, I got into this when I was in high school. I was a big Star Wars fan when my dad took me, and I'm dating myself because I didn't see it when it first came out. I saw it during the special editions, and I was at the right impressionable age to really get hooked. I got into cosplay because over the course of my high school uh, years, I pestered my band director to play Star Wars for every year, pretty much every month. And for my final concert, he relented, and we played the suite from the Star Wars franchise. To make the event even better, I had heard about a group called the 501st Legion, which is a group of Star Wars costumers who the goal is to dress up in costumes that look like they step right off the screen. They're trying to get what we call screen accurate. One of them responded and said, "Yeah, we'll come up." He came. I live in Vermont. He came all the way up from Rhode Island, and then drove back that night, suited up as a stormtrooper, blew the crowd away. And then after the concert was over, I said, like, "Well, how do I do this for myself?" And
Right.
he said, "Well, I'll send me some money for a kit. I'll hook you up." That summer, I got my first kit, and then when I was in college, I wore it a little bit here and there. But after I got out of college, I had a car, disposable income, and a job, so I could, when weekends free, so I could go to conventions, and I could go to what we call troops. And I've done ever since then. I've done a whole bunch of things, including going to ConnectiCon. But I've also been in the Macy's Day Parade. I've been to Star Wars Celebration, and yeah, it's been kind of a fun trip.
I just love the theme here where we all have that question of like, why don't we have X or can we play this because it's an awesome suite to play for a band? Do you remember what your music teacher's, what was his reaction when he saw what happened?
He was blown away. I think he was sort of just exasperated the whole time.
Right.
I was asking, but he actually he dressed up in a cape and he conducted with a red lightsaber, and yeah, it was a fun evening.
That's really cool to hear, and because you've been in it for so long, and we've been talking sort of about the evolution of fandoms and cosplaying. How have you seen cosplay change in the last 20 years?
It's gotten a lot more popular. To the point where it's almost like a mainstream thing. If you say I'm a cosplayer, most people will know what you mean. That certainly wasn't the case when I started this 20 years ago. And it's tracked alongside a whole bunch of different changes sort of in the world when it comes to entertainment. We've seen, in that time, Lost, the TV show Lost, Battlestar Galactica came out and really sort of became mainstream hits, even in other, genre shows. You have the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Game of Thrones, the reboot of the Star Wars franchise with The Force Awakens. All of these things, I think, really helped to inject a level of acceptance and coolness for what was previously a fairly niche topic. And as you have more people becoming fans of these stories, you have people who are looking for ways to express themselves, and that goes in a whole lot of ways. Sometimes it's wearing a T-shirt, sometimes it's writing fan fiction, sometimes it's going out and building a costume from your favorite show or your favorite movie or your favorite book. And then going to conventions, or if you're part of an organized group, going to different events. And so I think that, as these shows have really skyrocketed in popularity and become huge crossover mainstream hits, you have, a portion of that fan base saying like, hey, I want to go dress up as this. And they might not have known what cosplay was at the time, but it's like maybe you start with a Halloween costume and like, how do I make this a little bit better than just like what I can get off the shelf? And then you sort of go down a rabbit hole of like, oh, I can make this, I can, do this sort of thing. And nowadays we have technologies like 3D printing and where you can, make pieces of armor or prop weapons or, just props in general. Or you can go online and find people who make these things. So I think all those things have added up to turning cosplay into a much more visible and let's say a socially acceptable vocation.
Well, that's a great description because as you were describing sort of the evolution from the early 2000s, because I remember a phrase that came out from that era that I still use today is nerd chic. So all of a sudden being a nerd is cool. So it's kind of fun hearing you sort of describe how much has changed since this sort of became a thing many moons ago. And ahead of this hour, we also spoke to some people who are really into cosplay. And here's Andy Wolf. He's a cosplay photographer based here in Connecticut.
The first thing I do with every shoot is I sit down with the cosplayer, understand their cosplay, get a sense of their personality, and try to mix both the persona of the cosplay that they're or the character they're cosplaying, and their own personality, and mix that into the cosplay. So you get an image or photograph that's truly unique to them. ConnectiCon is really like for me, it's like the Super Bowl of cosplay photography. Since it's in downtown Hartford, there's a lot of great spots to take photography. You just need to use your imagination. So if you want riverfront, you got the riverfront. You want some futuristic backdrop, you can use some of the build, like the Science Center is a great building. I always consider it, like I said, it's my Super Bowl.
That was Andy Wolf. He's a cosplay photographer. And Paul, you've studied fandoms in physical and digital spaces, and these spaces have really exploded in recent years. And also talking about including more and more people doing cosplay. How have the rules of cosplay changed as well?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I agree 100% that this kind of nerd chic era, we're in our nerd chic era, as you might say. And I think the rules of cosplay have kind of evolved with it. You know, we were talking earlier about ConnectiCon being a safe space and making sure that people are there to have fun, not fun at other people's expense. And I love the way you phrased that, Matt, because I feel like that is the big shift with cosplay as it's gotten more popular, as it's gotten bigger, as it's become more well known. I think we're seeing lots of different people cosplay, people that don't necessarily fit the body type, the race, the gender of the person that they're cosplaying or the character that they're cosplaying. And I feel like, 15, 20 years ago, before cosplay was perhaps as popular as it is now, there was a real kind of antagonism, toxicity about people that weren't cosplaying, quote unquote, correctly. And I think what we've seen, certainly in the past 5 to 10 years, is a real shift to try and make cosplay a safe space, make it something that people of all shapes, all sizes, all colors, all genders can enjoy without fear that they're going to be ridiculed, because ultimately we're all there to celebrate this thing that we're a fan of, and we all celebrate differently.
Well, and Matt, as you shared with us earlier, sort of the intentionality behind ConnectiCon and making sure that it is a safe space to be, are you familiar with the harassment that does happen in cons? Like, have you seen it happen in ConnectiCon, and what happens if that does occur?
Yeah, so it unfortunately does still happen every year. There's also a lot of cliques within the cosplay community that tend to fight/dox each other back and forth constantly between various conventions within a region. So we actually have a harassment response team that is on our staff, and they will go and investigate something and get the venue security or police involved if necessary. A lot of times it just ends up with, hey, we're going to explain to you in the nicest way possible that what you are doing is not the correct way to go about doing anything. Please stop doing it. If we get another report, you're not going to be welcome here again. That often quickly corrects the bad behavior, and usually it's just because the person wasn't aware that the way they were behaving was coming off the way that it does. But they probably respond to about 100 calls a year, 30, 35 calls a day, which is, in my opinion, too many, but it's not as bad as it could be. I remember way back in my early days of going to conventions, like there'd be guys following girls in cosplays around all day, like just kind of stalking them around the convention center the whole day. And I was like, are you with them, or are you just following them around because you think they're attractive and are afraid to talk to them? I don't know what's going on, but also I didn't feel it was any of my business at the time to get involved, so I left it alone and hung out with my friends. And
Well, we're going to be digging deeper too in terms of how that has evolved over the years, and especially since you specifically have policies in place. That's certainly a change, I think, for many cons. And I do want to get to some more cosplayer voices who has shared their experiences with us. We also spoke with Julie and Joe Wilk. They're cosplayers from Boston, Massachusetts, and they attend ConnectiCon every year. And here's what Julie shared about cosplay and consent.
After the pandemic, I have noticed that, the whole cosplay is not consent. That is actually, people are learning what that actually means now instead of just kind of, not understanding what it was like before there were social distances. Etiquette at convention is, ask for a picture, keep your hands to yourselves unless you want to hug, but always ask. Over the years, when I first got into the cosplay scene in 2012, it was relatively new to a lot of people. Like, it wasn't mainstream, similar to what it is now. So when people saw people cosplaying for the first time, first of all, they were confused. One comment I would get a lot was, "Oh, it's not Halloween. What are you guys doing?" And people would try to say hurtful things because they see something that's out of the ordinary that they don't understand, and a community that they don't understand. But in the community itself, there has been issues in the past where, people get excited because they see characters they know and love, but they take the equation out, meaning they don't seem to understand that those people are people and not just characters. Like, yeah, they look like your favorite characters and everything, but these are people. These are human beings with feelings and restrictions, and, they're going to do what they're comfortable doing.
Andrew, can you respond to what we heard from Julie? Are you seeing or have you seen sort of this blurring of the lines between fiction and nonfiction?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, I think people, when you're dressing up as a fictional character and you go to a convention, you see your favorite character. You don't see necessarily that there's a person underneath it that is not really that person. And I think that's contributed a lot to, just the way that you might be approached. And there's an element where you want this to happen. You don't want people to come up to you unwanted, but you want the illusion of being the character there for people. So that's a good part of it. It's sort of when people's reactions sort of cross a line that it becomes a real problem, and that's depending on personal space and your comfort level and so forth. So what she was saying about asking, go up to somebody and ask for a picture. Don't just sidle up to them, take a selfie, and then wander off, or don't follow somebody out throughout the day. And that's an element that I think there has been a lot of awareness that has popped up in the last, certainly the last couple of years. And that's part of, just much larger societal things about consent and harassment and things like that. These are all really good things. And I'm really glad to see that, conventions have been stepping up and, posting up sign, not just posting up a sign and saying hey, don't do that.
Right.
You have policies in place that has consequences for these actions, and that's people will have to learn if they don't listen, they will learn the hard way by getting booted out of a convention, and nobody wants that. So that's a huge part of as this has become more and more popular. I think as more people learn about what cosplay is, it's sort of a learning curve for everybody involved, I think.
Well, yeah, it's pretty amazing to hear how much really goes behind being in a fandom. I think it's a lot more complicated than we think, and it really shouldn't be, right? Because you're trying to go to these cons and have a good time and not to be stressed out. And I think, Paul, you touched on this a little bit earlier, because I think gatekeeping is also a contribution to the harassment that you do see at cons. Can you talk about what type of gatekeeping do we see in the cosplay world?
It's very complicated, the concept of gatekeeping, because there's a fine line between gatekeeping and just being a fan of something. Not that I'm in any way defending gatekeepers, but because I think a lot of people who gatekeep, and when we talk about gatekeeping, we're talking about trying to police what you see as an appropriate type of fandom or an appropriate type of fan activity. And I think a lot of gatekeepers don't see themselves as gatekeepers. I think they see themselves as true fans, or we were here when. I call it the kind of hipster attitude, right? I was a fan of this before it got popular. And the trouble with that is everyone is a fan of something after somebody else. So the concept of gatekeeping itself is a fallacy, and there is no gate to keep. But because fandom is so intricately woven with people's identities, and who they are and who they identify as, and especially people who are attending conventions and who are regular kind of convention goers, regular cosplayers, the fandom is part of who they are. And so to have someone come in and do it differently can feel alienating and can feel like you're being somehow mocked. Now, the problem, of course, is that everyone practices their fandom differently, and everyone enjoys something differently. And I subscribe to the "don't yuck my yum" philosophy, right? Don't, just because I like something a particular way doesn't mean I'm not liking the way that you like it. So I guess I'm kind of talking in circles here, but the idea that like gatekeeping is it's related to the very act of being a fan, but it's related in a very negative way, because you're always trying to tell other people how to be a fan. And that's not fair, because, everyone does it differently.
Right. And I think with that in mind too, and as we're talking about more about how complicated this space can be and the importance of being able to protect yourself or to protect others, Andrew, have you seen cosplayers work more actively to establish boundaries and protect themselves at conventions? And is this something that I imagine they've had to think about before, but perhaps today they can be more open about it, and maybe they have more supporters that will help them with that process?
Yeah, I think so. I'm part of the 501st Legion, which is a large, it's an international costuming group, and we have a lot of us sort of established, say, policies and practices that we put into place when we're out in the field. So we call our events trooping. So that's whether we go to a movie theater, or if we go to a convention or a comic book store, a charity walk, things like that. Usually what we'll do is we'll have our troopers out in the field. And then we'll also have what we call wranglers. Sometimes they're called handlers or squires, depending on where you are, what garrison you're part of. And they're the ones who sort of are our eyes and ears, because when you put a stormtrooper helmet on, you can't see all that well. You can. I've worn enough so that I'm pretty aware of what my surroundings are, but I can't see past the sort of the size of my head, sure, where I might normally be able to see. So what their job is to sort of keep an eye out and make sure that we're okay. So, hey, do you have water? Do you have you feeling okay? Hey, there's this person behind you who's trying to steal the gun out of your holster or part of your kit. There's this person who wants to get a picture, come over here and look this way, that sort of thing. So they're sort of an extra person to help with that sort of thing, so that we can basically, when we're in armor, we can sort of focus on
no, still on the
sorry, lost my train of thought. Very briefly. We can focus on trooping and being in character. They could also be a sort of a eyes on the crowd. So if we do have people who are problems, and we do have that every now and then. We've had people who have come out. We've had troopers who've been pushed. We've had I've been in parades where I've been groped or touched on unwanted ways, and it's just that's just sort of the reality of going into the crowd. You don't always know what's going to happen. So they're an invaluable resource. The other part of that, I think cosplayers are a lot more forthcoming when it comes to problems, like speaking up when there is an issue, not just in person but online, because a lot of cosplayers, cosplay is not just an in-person thing, but it can also be an online persona, especially with like image and video heavy social networks like Instagram or TikTok. I know of many cosplayers who have had unwanted comments directed their way, either sexist or racist, or you take the whole gamut. So there's a lot more people who are willing to sort of point out these infractions and basically say, hey, this isn't cool.
Well, and before we go to break, Paul, I do want to ask too. We've been talking a lot about cosplaying and sort of the different eras that this has become, popular or has started from, and it seems like perhaps the fandoms maybe way back when it's a lot more limited, because I think we hear a lot about the superhero fandom, the Star Wars fandom, but now those fandoms have expanded, I think, exponentially. So can you talk about, when it comes to cosplaying, can people cosplay as anything? What are some of the limits? And I'm going to use a recent, I think, there's a movie called K-pop Demon Hunters on Netflix that really exploded, and I saw a lot of sort of infographics from people that are hoping fans will learn about the culture and to be respectful to that culture when they are designing their period pieces or their costumes. So just using that sort of as a specific example in terms of, do you consider the culture that you're trying to cosplay as well?
That's such a great question, and it's so complicated because there are obviously issues of cultural appropriation when certainly white people are cosplaying as people of different races that are canonically different races, or that are or that are played by people of different races, and because cosplay is, it's not a new practice, as we've been talking about, but it's because it's gotten so popular recently, and because fandom and conventions have gotten so huge, we're just seeing this influx of all these people who don't know the codes and the mores and the ways of being a fan that have been established for more than 100 years. If fandom is a type of community, if the cosplay community is a type of culture, then there are kind of unspoken practices and unspoken rules, so when you say, like, where you ask, is there a rule against this? There's no one's written a code of cosplay,
right?
Maybe Andrew's book is the closest we have.
No, it isn't.
But there's an unspoken sort of agreement about how you should cosplay. But when we have hundreds of thousands of new people coming into these environments, we see like this boiling tension come over. So to get into kind of the, like, should people cosplay characters of different races and different ethnicities, there's a really fine line between cultural appropriation and respect for the character.
Right.
I'm not the person to sit here and dictate this is what you should or shouldn't do. But I would say, listen to the cosplay community, listen to the community of the people that are of the race or the ethnicity or the type of person that is, and listen to what they're saying. I show this video to my students of a fan convention back in the 70s, and you see people wearing blackface, and it's shocking. And it was also of the time, and the things that are happening today are equally shocking, but we don't necessarily recognize them as shocking as they are because we don't have the distance of time. And so I feel like there's still a lot of discussion to be had. There's a lot of conversations that need to be had to really dig into what is and isn't appropriate.
So much.
One thing I wanted to jump in with is that I have found the cosplay community, being part of it, but also, through the course of my book, it's an incredibly welcoming environment. It is, for all some of the things that we've covered so far, it's a really a very joyful community, and it is a place where people are celebrating a story that they love, the characters that they love. And this is, I found cosplayers to bend over backwards to help people who are trying to break into the field. through the 501st, we because the way we're organized, we can hold what we call armor parties, where somebody might open up their house, their workshop, and invite other members in to say, hey, what are you working on? Bring it over. We'll work on it together. And we've had members. My ethos has always been like, if we have new members who are coming in, hold their hand, tell them how to do stuff. And that's been a little bit of a change from some of the earlier days where sort of like, here, read all this stuff. Here's some documentation. Here's the pictures. Do this research on your own, and then come back when you're ready. And I don't think that's really the case anymore. But certainly I've seen cosplayers, share the techniques that they use to make stuff, show off their stuff, to help other people, not just make their own costumes, but to just share in that joy and that love of those characters and those worlds.
Well, it's amazing to learn more about what it means to be a fan. You're not just, I always just say fangirling. You're not just fangirling over the thing that you love, but you're also learning a lot from the community. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. You've been listening to Andrea Liptek, who's the author of Cosplay, A History, and also of the newsletter, The Transfer Orbit. We're also listening to Paul Booth, professor of media and pop culture at DePaul University, and Matt Daigle, who's the founder of ConnectiCon. And they'll all be staying with us after a quick break. And fans, cosplayers, and everyone in between, we would love to hear from you. Let us know what's the latest convention you or your kids went, and what did you think about it? 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, we're talking about pop culture conventions. These massive gatherings brings fans together from throughout the world to here in Connecticut. And Matt, I want to jump straight to you here because as the founder of ConnectiCon, I think you know the importance of dressing up, meeting some of your favorite actors or creators, and seeing some amazing panels. And conventions are certainly a great place to connect and build community. But can you talk about why is it important to have something like this around Where We Live?
I think for me, and particularly when I was in high school, I was the odd kid out. I wasn't into sports. I wasn't into the popular stuff, and I didn't have a community in my high school that understood me or supported me or accepted me for who I was and what I was into. And ConnectiCon really does help fill that void for a lot of high school and even college students. Like once you get to college, it's a little easier to find more people that are into the stuff you're into. But the younger you are, the harder it is to feel seen and heard and understood and appreciated. And that's one of the big things that I love about ConnectiCon in particular is that our community that we've fostered over the last 22 years is so open, welcoming, and engaging to new people coming in. We have Eric Hahn from Connecticut Wonderful Facebook group. He brought his daughter for the first time a couple years ago, and she just had such an amazing time. And she's like, this is where I belong. We need to come back every year. And we hear those stories from parents who bring their 10 to 14-year-old kids for the first time to ConnectiCon. And that's the feedback we get constantly. And that's what helps keep us going. Making the event what it is and listening to attendee feedback and doing the best we can with the budget that we have. Part of the problem for ConnectiCon in particular is we are very close to Boston. We are very close to New York. Much bigger metros, much bigger events, much bigger budgets. Hard to compete with those, but we do the best we can to throw a really good event that everybody can enjoy.
Well, I certainly think it makes it a little bit special when it's more intimate. And as you say earlier, it's easier to have community when you can actually talk to each other and support each other. And Paul, fandoms were built by fans, but now I think we have a lot of official cosplayers or official fandoms, places to gather like conventions. Is that changing the nature of fandoms at all?
Absolutely, 100% changing the nature of fandom, and it's a positive and a negative. I hesitate to think it's just one or the other. We have this huge influx of people being fans, which brings new voices, brings new styles of fandom, brings incredibly vibrant, new, exciting things into fandom. But then you also have this sort of corporate understanding of fandom. And conventions are a really great example of this. Some conventions are very small, fan-run, just as you were saying, intimate. You get to have conversations, get to meet people. And then you have these kind of massive corporate conventions that are, in many ways, just how much money can we take from the fans? And this is a real conflict in fandom right now, and in fan spaces, between this uber corporate controlling, there is a right way to be a fan, and that is you pay us to let you be a fan with us, and this very open conversational sort of fandom, which is harder to generate and harder to maintain, harder to make sure is a safe space for everyone, but in many ways is also very rewarding. And I think this is just what happens when fandom has become popular, and we've entered that sort of fan chic era.
Well, and we've got about a minute and a half here left, but I want to get to Andrew real quick in terms of, do you have any advice for people who are thinking about going to a convention for the first time?
Yeah, have fun, wear comfortable shoes, drink a lot of water.
Very practical.
You are on your feet most of the day, and there's just so much to see, and so it's trying just to take it all in and just to enjoy yourself. I usually go to a con and have a plan, like I'm going to hit this panel, and I usually don't end up doing anything that I want to do because I keep ping ponging all over the place to see where everything is. So which I really love. Like, you get to sort of take in the energy of the crowd, and that's, I think, what I really love about all the conventions I've ever been to, whether it's Star Wars Celebration or one of the smaller local ones here. I just come away with this like contact high that I last like a week after, and then you sort of crash afterwards. It's just remember why you're there. You're there to have fun. You're there to enjoy yourself. And yeah, that's about it.
And then Matt, got about 30 seconds here. Anything specific to ConnectiCon that you would like people to know?
It's a really fun time. If you haven't been, check it out. I've been doing it 22 years. I'm going to keep doing it for another, hopefully 50 years, or get my kids into doing it instead of me, so I can relax a little bit and enjoy the con.
Well, I hope you do get to do that, and thanks for coming back again and again. I'm sure a lot of fans out there appreciate it. You've been listening to Matt Daigle, who's the founder of ConnectiCon. Thank you so much, Matt, for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You are also listening to Paul Booth, who's a professor of media and pop culture at DePaul University. Paul, we appreciate your time as well.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much.
And Andrew Liptek, who's the author of Cosplay, a history, and of the newsletter, The Transfer Orbit. Andrew, thank you so much for being on the show as well.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. Thank you all so much for listening, and have fun cosplaying and joining in on a nerdy chic world.